Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. The necklace that I wear every single day, like most days, it's definitely my favorite. It's down here if you want. Don't forget to follow my backup account I'm saving for a car, but also I've started a new series over there. It's called The Court of Tea, and I am Judge Duty. You guys are the jury. Don't you love that? Anywho, I'm going to tag my other account, go follow. Now on to the story. The Christmas gift. Yeah, I want to submit my story from childhood in Chicago around 1994. I don't mind sharing my identity, but I'll just go by Kay. Everybody say hi, Kay. This was around the holidays, specifically Christmas time. My brothers and I, for the last week leading up to Christmas, had been taking a peek at our gifts and cutting out small corners of the wrapping paper to see what was inside, and had gotten yelled at for sneaking in the living room at night. You would have also got yelled at if I would have noticed that you were snipping off pieces of that damn paper. Because I'd be damned if I rewrap that shit. So Christmas Eve comes, we're all in bed, and it's nighttime. We're waiting for the time our parents tell us to get up and open our gifts. None of us could sleep. I'm in my room in the middle of the hall. The middle two boys are in their room down the hall closest to the kitchen, and the oldest boy is in his room down the hall by the living room. I'm lying in my bed, and I hear a sound, and I peek to see who was brave enough to sneak into the tree tonight. Instead of my brothers, I see walking through the hall a woman in a long dress holding a gift. Because it wasn't my brothers, I thought it was a family member that my parents had invited over to bring gifts that were too big for them to hide in the house. I think nothing of it, and I go back to sleep. The next morning, as we're all opening our gifts, my parents are sitting stone-faced, not really interacting with us as we open them. That's weird. Fast forward to Christmas Day, we're having Christmas dinner with the families, and my parents start talking about it after getting a little bit of adult beverage in them. My mom starts to just poke fun at my dad, asking him to tell us what had happened, and my dad said no, he didn't really want to get into that. But my mom divulges anyway. She begins to say that on the night of Christmas Eve, they were also in their bed and expecting one of us to get up again and peek at our gifts, when they also saw the lady walking down our hall with a gift in her hand. My father got up with a bat in hand to go attack the other person because they had no idea who it was. My mom and dad get into the living room and there's no one there. They wake my brother up because his room was adjacent to the living room and asked him if there was anybody in his room and what's going on. The three of them go into the living room and find a gift in an unfamiliar wrapping paper under the tree. The way I would be shitting bricks. What do you fucking mean that there's a gift under that tree? They bicker a little bit, my parents, over whether or not to open it, but ultimately they do decide to open it, and it is full of money. Wait. Did you find out who she was? Can I send her my address? Did we need it? Probably. It was the holidays, but my parents, being mildly religious at the time, thought that it could not be a good omen. Bitch! My dad and my older brother, who was around 16 at the time, took the money out and threw it in the trash down the alley. Imagine being that ghost. Here I am, for the holidays, trying to do something nice in the afterlife. And I had to steal this money. Ghosts don't have fucking money. And I bring it to you because I know that you need it, and you go and you throw it in the alley? Damn, the gardening really got me today. Our doors were locked and nobody could get in. Nobody could get out. And that time that it took my dad to run from their room to the living room was 60 seconds tops. And he would have seen anybody leaving out the front door as it was directly in front of the living room. To this day, it's one of the creepiest stories I can recall ever happening in my childhood, but I do love to tell. Yeah, because that's a good one. But also, what the fuck do you mean y'all threw the money away? What do you mean money's a bad omen? I'm surprised y'all ain't been haunted after that. Again, if it was me, I did all that work, that nice gesture to give y'all money, and you throw it away, I'd be haunting you. Anyway, rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. Don't forget to go follow my other page and watch my new series. Okay, thanks. Stay spooky, friends.
I got an email from this girl who said that her and her friends went to the Appalachian Mountains and one of her friends was literally knocked unconscious by some creature. So we're going to call this girl Kelsey for the story. So when Kelsey was around 15, 16 years old, her and her two friends, we're going to call them Chloe and Lacey, decided that they wanted to go to Kelsey's late grandparents' cabin in the Appalachian Mountains. None of them had driver's license at this time, and so her mom, Kelsey's mom, had to drop them off. And the only thing that Kelsey's mom said when she dropped them off is, don't go into the forest that night. She did not tell them about the rules at all. They did not know about the rules at all whatsoever. That's important to know. Now, she said that when they got into the cabin, they set their stuff down, and the only thing that they did do right is they locked the door. They left the windows unlocked, and they didn't close the curtains. It starts to get dark outside after they've put all their stuff away. So they decide that they're going to go in the living room and they're going to watch a couple of movies. They're sitting there enjoying the movie when suddenly they hear tap, tap, tap on the window. They all kind of look at each other like, why? What is that? So Chloe decides that she's going to get up and she's going to go over and open the curtain and see what's outside tapping on the window. So she does that, but she doesn't see anything. As she's walking back, though, she did say that she had kind of a weird feeling in her stomach. After she sits back down, they resume the movie and they're just chilling when tap, tap, tap. Again, someone is knocking on the window. So Chloe gets up again. She checks the window again. Still nothing. She walks over. She sits back down. They resume the movie again. And then tap, tap, tap. Really loud on the window this time. This time, Lacey stands up. And Lacey is super annoyed at this point. So she goes over. She thinks that someone is messing with them. She opens the curtains. And as soon as she opens those curtains, she falls to the ground and starts screaming. Kelsey said that to this day, Lacey still will not talk about what she saw at that window. And the crazy thing was that they stayed there for a week. And this was only the first day. Well, the next day, Lacey is just traumatized at this point. And so she is like, I'm not leaving this house. I don't want to go anywhere. She won't talk about what she saw, nothing. And so Chloe and Kelsey decide that they're going to go on a hike in the mountains. So they go on a hike for a little bit. They're out there for about an hour when suddenly Chloe starts to feel sick, like very sick, and she has to sit down. As Chloe is sitting down, just kind of trying to make herself feel better, Kelsey said that she had this innate feeling that something was watching them. So Kelsey tells Chloe, like, I think we need to go. I feel like someone is watching us. And so they get up and they go back home. The only thing is when they walk through the door, Lacey is not home. She is not there. They check all the rooms. She's not there. They call her 7 times. They called her and she is not answering her phone. They don't really know what to do at this point. They're getting a little worried when Lacey suddenly walks through the door. And Kelsey said that when Lacey walked through the door after that, like that entire night, she was acting really odd. Like she wasn't acting like herself. So they all decide that they are going to go to bed, but not before locking all the windows, closing the curtains, and locking the door. Well, Kelsey goes into her room, she gets ready for bed, and she falls asleep. She wakes up at 5 a.m. because she hears tiles creaking, like someone is walking on the tiles outside of her door. She just kind of calls out, "Girls?" Silence. Nothing. So she gets up and she walks into their rooms. She walks into Lacey's room. Lacey's not in her room. She walks into Chloe's room. Chloe's not in her room. Suddenly, tap, 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 coming from the bathroom window, which is the only one without curtains. So bravely, Kelsey decides that she's going to walk over and check that window. And she goes over and checks and nothing is there. She thinks that maybe she was just hearing something. And so she decides to brush this off and go to bed. So she goes to bed and she wakes up the next morning and she walks outside of the room and she asks Chloe and Lacey, like, did you guys get up last night? And Lacey's like, nope. And Chloe's like, no, I thought that was you guys. Kelsey was a little confused about why she didn't see them in their beds, but I guess she kind of kept this to herself. She didn't really say anything about that. So that day was pretty uneventful. But later on that night, Chloe suggests that they go outside when it gets dark to watch the stars. This was the worst idea ever. She says that as they were watching the stars, they're laying on the grass and they're just looking up at the sky and they're admiring how beautiful the stars are in the mountains because they live in the city and they are not the same in the city. And I can attest to that. So they're just chatting, looking at the stars when suddenly they hear this crack, this like creaking noise. It sounds like someone is stepping on a stick. Now, they look behind them and they don't see anything. So they kind of just brush this off. They lay back down again. They're looking up at the stars and now they're like counting the stars. And as soon as they're counting the stars, all of a sudden Lacey jumps up and she starts screaming. And she's like, something just grabbed my hair. Something just grabbed my hair. Now, Chloe and Casey are like, what do you mean something grabbed your hair? Like, are you okay? They're trying to comfort her at this point. And right as they're trying to comfort her, something grabs Lacey's hair and pulls her down so hard that she gets knocked out. Kelsey said that as soon as this happened, she saw exactly what did this. And still to this day, over 5 years later, it still haunts her. She said she saw this pale, white-faced creature with Lacey's hair in its teeth as it was smiling, and there was all over its teeth. She's looking at this thing, and this thing is just looking back at her with Lacey's hair in its teeth, smiling at her and coming out of its mouth. As Kelsey is looking at this thing, absolutely horrified, she feels this big shove, and she gets shoved to the ground so hard that she hits her face on the ground, and now her mouth is She said Chloe was just standing there screaming as Kelsey is on the ground. Lacey's still knocked out. At this point, Kelsey looks at Chloe and is just like, call my mom and tell her to come get us. Chloe runs inside of the house as Lacey is still knocked out, and Kelsey is just sitting there tasting her own in her mouth, and this thing is still behind her, and she can hear it, but she's not looking at it because she's terrified to look at this thing, and she doesn't know what else to do, but her face hurts, so she doesn't want to get up. Kelsey said that she laid there for what felt like forever until her mom came and picked them up, and her mom gets out of the car, helps, at this point, I think Lacey is awake at this point, she helps Lacey get into the back seat, she helps Kelsey get into the back seat, and Chloe gets in the front seat, and she said that Chloe was just crying the entire way home. Kelsey said that to this day, she still sometimes will see that white face, especially when she's going through something hard, which I think is absolutely terrifying. And she also said that it just haunts her in her nightmares. She can't get it out of her head. So what did you guys think about this story? What do you think this was? Has anyone ever heard of anything like this in the Appalachian Mountains? That might be the first story that I've heard where someone actually got like hurt, like by something that was haunting them. Not that it was haunting them, whatever this thing was, we don't know what it was, or maybe someone in the comments can say what they think it was, because I would love to know if you know, and I'm sure she would too. But I don't even know what to say about this story. It's pretty terrifying. But any thoughts, suggestions, comments that you have, please drop them below.
Okay, so I'm gonna skip all the introductions. If you guys know me, you know that I've been haunted for a long time. I did the Ouija board, the seance with Zozo, the demon, whatever. If you want to hear that story time, go on my page and find it. It's somewhere deep down. But in this story time, okay, in the last one I told you guys that I was going to be telling you more stories about it, and I've kind of put it off, but now I thought of one, and I don't know how I didn't think of this one before, because honestly, it's one of the most terrifying experiences that I had when I was a child, and if you know anything about me, you know that I have a lot of terrifying experiences that have happened to me when I was a child, so let's get into it. This one involves playing flashlight tag in the middle of the night with a bunch of the neighborhood kids and my cousins. So basically, my parents' house was like the house to like migrate to when like the neighbors and stuff wanted to hang out. We had a fire pit, trampoline, a play set, a pool, a sandbox, a hot tub. We had it all. We had everything. So everybody like wanted to flock there. And my family knew how to cook some good barbecue grill stuff. Anyways, we're all there. We're having a great time during the daytime. The kids are like, we're all playing tag. Like, and mind you, we literally live like, it's a neighborhood, but it's surrounded by forest. And so we were playing through the forest, going down to the creek, like playing in the water, doing little kid stuff during the day. And then nighttime comes, and we decide, oh my god, okay, we're gonna do a bunch of nighttime activities. So we decide, okay, first we're gonna go night swimming. We fucked up that pool night swimming. It was so fun night swimming. My mom had like those tiki lights that she used to hang around the edges of the pool so everything would be lit up, and like those big string ones that go across the top, so it just felt like a little fairy tale land, you know what I mean? We were having the time of our lives playing mermaids and fairies. We ended up getting out of the pool, we roasted some marshmallows and made some s'mores and whatever, and then we were like, hey, it's getting pitch black outside. This is the perfect time for flashlight tag. So we all went to our houses, we all got flashlights, and then met back up in the middle of the street, okay? And the entire neighborhood was free reign for us to go, including like the edge of the woods. Technically, we could have gone further into the woods if we wanted to, but like, it's a little fucking scary to do that at night. There was 8 of us all together this one particular night. Usually it was between like 8 to like 11 of us kids out, but everything was going great until okay, I was the one who was searching for everybody who was hidden, right? So okay, I forgot to mention that we made the flashlight tag / hide and seek. That was like our little spin twist on the things. Like, so everybody went hiding in a direction with their flashlights on, so that like I kind of got a gist of where everybody was going. But then once you like got to like around where you were gonna hide, you shut your flashlight off and found a spot to hide. So like you kind of knew the vicinity of where people were gonna be, but it was still hard to find people in the middle of the night in the pitch fucking black. It was a fun game, but it ended up not being such a fun time because I ended up seeing this light that I thought I was following my friend Isis, okay? And I'm like fucking freaking out about thinking about it now because literally, shut up. Okay, so I thought that I was following my friend Isis, and she like darted up through this light, I should say, darted up towards like the edge of the woods, like the very dense part of the woods, mind you, not even close to the trail that we usually go on. So that was already weird, but I was like, okay, what a good hiding spot, but I'm gonna catch her. So I'm following this light, right? And I'm like, okay, but at this point, like the lights should have already been off. But I thought that I was catching her in the act of finding her hiding spot. So I was like, this is gonna be the perfect, like she thinks she's so smart, but I'm smarter than she is. So I get over to the tree line and the light stops shining. So I'm like, okay, she thinks that she's like slick. So I scan everywhere. I literally fucking scan everywhere and I don't see anything anywhere. But all of a sudden I started to hear this low growl that was coming from behind this like larger oak tree slash rock. That was like an oak tree and a rock right next to it. It was like kind of a boulder. And so I'm like, okay, there she is. She's back there. Why did I think she was growling? I don't fucking know. I go back there and I immediately see two glowing red eyes in the darkness. And when I shine my flashlight on it, it's like this fucking mangled looking, like, I honestly don't even know how to explain it. It was like hunched over, completely gray. It had like weird animal-like legs, but like, I don't even know, like a spine. I could see all of its bones and its spine. The way that I fucking ran, I didn't hear anything chase me or anything, but when I was running, I saw everybody come back out because they heard me screaming. So everybody came out of their hiding spots. And along comes Isis running around the back of my house. Like she hadn't even gone anywhere near the wood line. So I don't know what I was following, but it was not my friend. And it was absolutely horrifying. I had nightmares about that for weeks and I was like terrified to go into the woods. But after a while I was like, you know, I'm not gonna let anything like spook me from going to my favorite spot in the whole world. So I ended up getting over that fear, kind of, having had that thought in the back of my head for a very long time. It's kind of been pushed to my subconscious that I just kind of thought about it now. So crazy. And it's not even the first time I've seen a creature like that in the woods. That may have been one of the first stories that I've ever like had an encounter with something like that. But I do have another one that I've told on my page before about me and my friend Jamie going like on this little adventure in the back of her woods area. And we ended up seeing something similar to that, but bigger, behind a large boulder, and it was like eating an animal. It was eating a dead carcass of an animal. So if you want to hear that story time, it's also on my page somewhere else. But yeah, I have tons of other stories. Like I grew up near the Appalachian Trail, and so, you know, spooky things happen out here. As Courage the Cowardly Dog says, spooky things happen in the middle of nowhere. Or what does he say? Strange things happen in the middle of nowhere. Either way, I know firsthand. I've got a lot of stories. Let me know.
What would you do if you got turned around hiking after dark and then saw a woman floating between the trees? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about someone who said that they saw a woman in the woods and now they'll never go hiking alone again. I went hiking alone because I'd done that trail a bunch of times before and didn't think much of it. It was one of those longer loop trails just outside of town where people go after work or on weekends. I had a real big flashlight in my backpack, water, snacks, all the things that I needed, and I wasn't being reckless. I just stayed out later than I meant to. By the time I realized I'd taken the wrong split on the trail, the light was already dropping. I still wasn't panicking yet. I knew the trail system well enough that I'd figured I'd just cut back the way I came and get to the parking area before it got fully dark. I had my flashlight and I had my car. I was annoyed more than anything. Then the woods got quiet in the way that they do when you're alone and it's getting late. No voices from other hikers and no dogs and bikes, just my own steps and the beam of my flashlight moving over the path. I had been walking maybe 10 more minutes when I heard the buzzing. Loud and close, off to my left somewhere in the trees. My first thought was bees, that kind of thick buzzing sound like a disturbed nest. It was strange because it was too late in the day for that to make sense, but that's still what my brain reached for. So I turned and pointed the flashlight toward it, and at first I thought I only caught white fabric. Then I lifted the beam higher and saw her. There was a woman suspended between the trees. Long hair hanging down, thin white nightdress filthy at the hem, and her feet weren't touching anything. That was the first thing my body understood before my mind did. She was a few feet off the ground and just hanging there in the air like something had lifted her and left her. Her eyes were wide open, and I could see the whites all the way around them. Her mouth was hanging open too, and she wasn't blinking, she wasn't moving, and the buzzing was coming from her. I froze. I remember every muscle in my body locking up at once because I kept waiting for my brain to turn it into something else. Cloth caught on branches, or somebody playing a prank, a trick of the light, literally anything else. Then her head turned toward me. Fast. Too fast. And then she smiled. It spread slowly, like she was enjoying how long it was taking for me to understand what I was looking at. I ran. I didn't stay to think. I didn't stay to keep the flashlight on her, and I turned and ran flat out down the trail. Branches hit my arms, my light kept jumping all over the path, and I almost lost my footing twice. Somewhere behind me, I could hear steps tearing through the woods, fast, closer than they should have been, and that was what made me start screaming. I could hear leaves getting crushed, feet hitting dirt, and something weaving between the trees and keeping pace with me. Every time I risked a glance back, the flashlight beam caught trunks and brush and empty trail, but I never got a clear look again while I was running, which somehow made it worse. I knew something was there, and I just couldn't catch it. I hit the parking lot area so hard I almost slammed into the side of my car. I fumbled my keys, dropped them, picked them back up, got inside, and locked the doors. And for a second, I just sat there gasping with the flashlight still in my hand. The woods beyond the lot looked empty. My headlights lit up the edge of the trail and the first row of trees. Nothing moving, no one there. I remember thinking maybe I had finally lost it. Maybe I had seen somebody hanging from a branch and panicked, and maybe the run had been deer. Maybe... And then I saw her. She was standing at the tree line, not floating now, just standing there in that same nightdress, hair hanging around her face, head tilted a little like she was curious about me. She should have been far enough away that I couldn't make out much, but her face looked clear anyway. The eyes were still too wide, and the smile had not left. I threw the car into reverse, and before I could pull away, she was suddenly at my window. I did not see her cross the lot. 1 second she was at the trees, and then she was bent down at the driver's side glass with one hand flat against it. Her skin looked gray in my headlights. Her hair was wet at the ends, clinging to her shoulders, and I could smell something through the vents too, sweet and rotten at the same time, like flowers left too long in standing water. She looked right at me. Then she said through the glass very softly, "You taste better when you're scared." I backed up so fast the tires screamed. I nearly slid into the ditch trying to turn out of that lot. I don't even remember the first couple miles home. I just remember checking the rear view over and over until my eyes hurt. She was never back there. I convinced my dad to go back with me the next day because I wanted to prove to myself that I had just scared myself for no reason and there had to have been a better explanation. But the trail was normal and the parking lot was normal. Nothing hanging in the trees, no white fabric, no footprints I could point to and say, "See, look, here." But right by my driver's door, pressed into the dust on the outside of the car, there was a handprint with long fingers and mud packed into the lines of the palm. I never hiked there alone again, and I don't hike near dark at all now. And every once in a while, when I get nervous enough that I can feel my own heartbeat in my throat, I still hear that line in my head like she's right beside me again. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
People say that when evil takes it too far with you, you have a lot of karma to pay. In this next story, I don't know if they had that much karma to pay, but I will say that this is beyond creepy. Like always, I will be changing people's names for privacy reasons. For a long time, Rebecca and her family knew that there was a mimic in the house. So everyone always made sure to text the other person when they were going to be home, how long they were going to be out, and when they arrived. No one ever called out for another person in the house unless they sent the text message letting you know that they were there. Now, how could you live like this? I have no idea, but she says that they did this for years. Rebecca, her and her mom were planning to go to Delsey Drive-In movie theater where you can watch the movies outside. Now, many people may not know this, but there's still drive-in movies where you can watch movies outside. Now, of course, Rebecca's excited. She loves watching movies outside, the night sky, the breeze, everything about it she loves. Rebecca's in her room. She's gathering her things, her blanket, her pillow, everything that she needs to get comfy in the car to watch this movie. She can hear her mom all of a sudden call from the next room. Now, Rebecca knows her mom is not home. So what she does is she rushes to the door, locks the door, and sits on her bed. She begins to text her mom, asking her mom, how far are you from the house? I'm starting to hear the mimic call me from the other room, and I know it's not you. So can you please tell me how far you are from the house? The moment she receives a text message back stating, no, I'm home. And that's what threw her off a little bit, because she never heard the door, she never heard the car, and she kind of was confused because there's always a rule to text before you get home and then to text when you arrive, so that way no one gets confused with the mimic. So of course she's like, kind of like, maybe my mom forgot the rule, maybe she's in a rush to get home, and you know, she's kind of like running all these excuses through her mind as to what happened with the miscommunication, that her mom was the one that installed. So, of course, she texts her mom back, okay, I'll be there in a second, Mom. Give me 1 minute. Let me grab my things. And that's when her mom texted her right away and said, no, come here. So, of course, she's like, okay. She texts her back. So as she's putting her phone down, she hears her mom call her from the next room again. So of course, Rebecca's like, you know what? Maybe my mom's in a bad mood. Maybe something happened. Maybe she's a little off. Grabs all her things from her bedroom and makes her way to her parents' room. As she's making her way to her parents' room, she realizes the light's off in the bedroom, and she says, Mom, are you there? And she hears her mom call her from the bedroom. And she's like, well, Mom, why are you in the dark? So she reaches over into the room to turn on the light switch. And as she turns on the light switch, her mom's back is towards the door where she's standing. She's like, Mom, come on, let's go. Like, I have everything ready. Let's go. Like, I'm been waiting for you for a while. So she's like, come on. And of course, her mom doesn't make a sound, doesn't turn around. She's like, Mom, I'll just wait for you downstairs. I understand maybe you're going through a tough time right now and you forgot to communicate with me. I'm not mad at you, but I really don't want to miss this movie, so let's go. So without hesitation, Rebecca turns around and makes her way down the stairs. As she's making her way down the stairs, she's opening the front door. She hears her mom from top of the steps yell at her and say, stop. And of course, Rebecca turns around, looks up the stairs, and she says, Mom, come on, like, we're late. And I still have to grab the things in the kitchen, or do you want to grab them? Her mom just blank stare, like literally had a blank stare staring at her, and tells her stop again. And she's like, Mom, what are you doing? Rebecca's saying this. Her mom slowly tilts her head to the side and says, you forgot the stuff in the kitchen. Trying to leave the house, she goes, Mom, it's okay. I'll go get the stuff after I put my bags in the car. And that's when her mom yelled at her and said, no car. Frightened, backs up, and her mom starts coming down the stairs slowly and says, I'm sorry for scaring you. I'm sorry. Rebecca goes, it's okay, Mom, it's fine. Maybe you're a little stressed that we're about to leave and we're running out of time. It's okay, Mom. It's just, don't yell at me like that. That kind of scared me. You've never yelled at me like that before. And she goes, just come here. And of course, Rebecca, trying to make peace with her mom, she walks over and hugs her mom. And as she's hugging her mom, she starts to realize that her mom has no bones, and that her mom is cold, and that her mom's skin is scaly, and that this isn't her mom. Slowly, her mom's grip around her starts to get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And Rebecca starts to scream. And as she's screaming, whatever this thing is that's hugging her begins to laugh in her ear. Rebecca hears her mom say, what are you doing? And she shoots around and sees her mom at the front door. And Rebecca just starts crying and running towards her mom. And as she's hugging her mom's like, I'm sorry, I kind of left my phone upstairs. I know you're upset that we're late, but I'm sorry. And Rebecca's trying to get the words out of what just had happened. So what do you guys think that was? And what kind of mimic is that?
How lucky is this woman? Certain people are more sensitive to the paranormal than others, but I wish I could sense my loved ones after they've passed. And this next story comes from a woman who had multiple experiences. She says that when she was 19 years old, her mother had passed away from cancer. She also happened to be a couple weeks pregnant with her daughter, and she wasn't aware at the time. When her mother got more sick, they got her a big comfy recliner that was just for her mother. After her mother passed away, she got married and moved out and brought the recliner with her. So a few months later, her pregnant butt gets up in the middle of the night to make one of the many trips to the bathroom. And as she passed by, she saw her mother sitting there in that recliner. Her hair had grown back and she was sitting there wearing her favorite outfit. So at first she's in shock and all she can get out was just, hello? But then she ended up relaxing and she says she stood there and had a full conversation with her mother for a while, which, oh my goodness. Her mother told her that she was pregnant with a girl, that she was due in June but going to be born in July. She also said she wasn't going to be staying with him, meaning her current husband, who had been cheating on her, but she didn't know it at the time, as well as a few other things. And she said that every single thing her mother told her came to pass. She said her due date was June 29th, but she had her daughter on July 5th. She ended up moving back home with her dad when her daughter was 2 because her husband indeed was cheating on her. She says when she walked in the door, the first thing her father said to her was, "Your mother is so happy that you're coming back home." Now at first, she chalked that up to his depression because he was really struggling since she had passed. I mean, to the point where he had removed every single picture of her from around the entire house. He couldn't even bear to look at her. It was as if her mother was never there, but she said you could still feel her there. So she says her father worked the night shift 4 to midnight, and on one particular night, her daughter was in bed sleeping and she decided that she was going to take a bath, and she kept the bathroom door open so that she would be able to hear her daughter if she would have gotten up. So she's in the tub and she hears the sound of someone on the back porch, but she knows it couldn't be her dad because he would not be home from work for a few hours. She said she was expecting to hear somebody knocking on the door, but then all of a sudden she could hear footsteps coming from the dining room, and they were coming towards the bathroom. She said out of sheer panic or maybe stupidity, she shouted out, "I don't care who you are. I don't want to see you or hear you." And then just like that, the footsteps stopped. And then a few moments later, she hears her daughter start to speak. She was cheerfully greeting, saying, "Hi, Grandma." She can hear her daughter having a conversation with Grandma from down the hall. She even said, "You're back to play with me." And all the while, she is just nervously standing in the hallway listening in. She said she doesn't know why, but she was just so scared for some reason. She didn't have the guts to look in the door until she heard her daughter say, "Okay, bye, Grandma." And then she entered into the room, and of course, nothing was there. She said that going forward, she would always hear her daughter laughing and talking seemingly to herself, and when she would approach her and ask her who she's talking to, she would always admit that she was talking with Grandma, and she absolutely believes that that was true. And so one day, her daughter came up to her and said, "Grandma is very happy that you named me after her," which was true, but also she said that they never told her that that was the case. Like, they never spoke about the fact that they named her after her grandma. Another time, when her daughter was about 3 years old, she decided to go through some old pictures, and she had them sort of spread out all over the table, all old family photos. And she called her daughter over and she said she wanted to show her something. And before she could even get it out of her mouth, her daughter was like, "Look, there's Grandma." And she points right to the picture of her grandma. And at the time, she had never shown her an image of what this woman looked like. Said there was even a lot more that happened in that house over the next 20 years. And even today, Sharon, her daughter, still brings up the facts about how she remembers talking to Grandma all those years prior. She says that she is so happy that her daughter got to meet her mother. She did mention that when they originally moved back home, she gave her daughter her mother's old room. She is sure that her mother wouldn't have had it any other way. She also says she thinks back and she really misses that house, and if it ever comes up for sale again, she would buy it in a heartbeat. How cool is that story? I have never heard of so much communication with a loved one. Do you have any stories of your own where you have experiences with people who have passed away? Maybe in a dream, or even better, in waking reality? If you do, I gotta hear it. And if you're new here, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
The story that I'm gonna tell you, honestly, it creeps the fuck out of me still when I think about it. So growing up, I mean, I didn't really grow up with my grandparents. We would go visit them, like when we went to Mexico and stuff, and on vacation. And I remember like really spending a lot of time with my mom's mom, but with my dad's mom, we hardly like ever spend time. And I remember my mom always being so cautious, like, be careful what you eat when you go to your grandma's house. Don't get everything. But for some reason, my grandma had like a really, really like strong connection with me, I guess. I remember her always telling me like, oh, you look so much like your dad. But she would always kind of single my little sister out, like, oh, but you know, your sister looks like your mom so much. And I remember she would like grab my face and be like, oh, you're so beautiful, you know, you look just like my son. And so, I mean, me and my sister would joke around about it, like, oh, you're the favorite one, you're the favorite one. But I never really took it like, it was like whatever. So I used to work in a warehouse when my oldest daughter she was like a year and a half. And I had found out that just recently, like, I remember when I was working, I found out that then I was pregnant with my son. So I remember working a graveyard shift, and I remember not telling anybody because I work with mostly guys. And I'm like, they don't need to know about my business or whatever. And I must have been like a month pregnant. So I remember getting off of work, and I felt so uneasy, you know, like I had a feeling, I don't know, like something bad was going to happen. And I remember I couldn't sleep. But before I even went to go lay down, I remember like looking at the end of the hallway, like I get there, right? And I'm going to go to my room, but the hallway was so dark. And I remember like I was about to turn on the light, and I stayed looking at the end of the hallway. And I remember seeing this really dark, like a human figure, right? And I got so like tripped the fuck out. I was like, what the fuck is that? And I turn on the light, and there's nothing there. So then I try to go to sleep or whatever. And mind you, I must have slept for like 2 hours. And then I had this sudden urge to like call my mom. So I remember I called my mom, and I was like, hey mom, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm so glad you called. I'm like, what happened? And she's like, your grandma just passed away. And I remember I was like, what the fuck? And I told my mom what had happened, you know, how I had seen that figure at the end of the hallway. And my mom jokingly was like, oh, she probably want to say goodbye to you. You know, she probably, you know, Dios se despedida, like said her goodbyes. And it kind of stuck with me, right? So mind you, remember I work graveyard at this warehouse. And so I remember walking into HR office. And I wish I could see this girl. I mean, I wish I could reach out to her, or she could reach out to me if she ever were to see my videos. I remember walking into the HR, and she's like, hey, like try to approach me. She's like, can I tell you something? But I don't want you to feel uncomfortable what I'm going to tell you. And I'm thinking in my head, what the fuck is she going to tell me? You know? And I remember she's like, oh, it like terrifies me when I think about it, because everything that happened after was so fucking scary. I remember her like telling me, you know, it's gonna sound awkward, blah blah. Cut the story short. She's like, somebody walked in with you. And I'm like, the fuck? I walked in by myself, you know? She's like, no, it was an older lady that just passed away. And I remember looking at her like, what the fuck are you talking about? And she's like, starts describing my grandma to me. When she told me this, I felt like my heart dropped, you know? I'm like, how the fuck does she know? And so she tells me that, and then she's like, but she can't rest. Like, she needs to tell you something. And I'm like, tell me what? Like, you can't tell me? You know? And she's like, no, like, your grandma needs to tell you. And I remember I was like, no, like, I don't want her to come to me. Like, how is she gonna come to me in a dream? Like, I was starting to trip. Because, mind you, when my grandma passed away, the way I remember her, like, no, I was so terrified, honestly, when she passed away. Like, I didn't want her to come back to me like that. She was very old already when she passed away, but her skin was so fragile. Like, if you picked her up, like, literally her skin would rip wherever she was, like, picked up from. So she's like, she's gonna come to you, blah blah. And I'm like telling her, like, no, like pleading, like, no, I don't want her to come to me. Like, I sound like a crazy person. And so she's like, but she's not coming to you right now, you know? And she's like, when you have your son. When she told me that, I was already tripping, you know? This just like threw me overboard, right? And so she's like, yeah, when you have your son. I hadn't told anybody I was pregnant, let alone I didn't even know what I was having. So I remember every night, like, praying to God, like, please don't let her come to me. Please, I'm terrified of her. Like, I don't want her to come. God, like, I would pray for her every night. Like, I was literally terrified of her. And the day comes where I have my son, right? So I'm continuing to pray every night for her, like lighting candles for her, and I'm like, please don't come, please don't ever come. I don't care what you did. Like, I don't want to know what you have to tell me. Like, why are you choosing me? Like, choose somebody else. Like, and I remember telling the same girl that told me that, and I'm like, can she choose somebody else? Like, and she's like, no, because she knows you're strong and you're gonna be able to handle what she's gonna tell you. And that stuck in my head, and I remember just like losing it, to be honest. And I don't know, I felt like so uncomfortable my whole pregnancy because I just was waiting for her to arrive. So I ended up having my son, and at that time my daughter had her own room, but she would sleep in a little toddler bed in my room. So the toddler bed was right next to my bed, and I remember like breastfeeding my son. Tell me why. This is when I think about it, it's so terrifying, to be honest. Like, I really hope she doesn't ever come back, because my daughter's sitting in her toddler bed, and she kind of like sits up, and she's like not fully awake, right? So she's sitting up, and her eyes, they're like not open, but she's like, I don't know if she's trying to open them or rolling back, but I'm tripping the fuck out. I see her sit up, and then she's like, kukui, kukui. Bitch. Kukui? You know, I'm like, kukui, and I'm like calling her name, like, wake up, wake up. But let me give you a little background. When my daughter, when I was changing my daughter's diaper, right, we had a picture of my grandma in a spare room at my mom's house. And I remember how she like looked up at the picture, and she was like, kukui, kukui, pointing at my grandma's picture. And I'm like, kukui? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, kukui is like something scary, right, in Spanish. And I'm like, telling like my mom, come here, look what she's saying. And mom's like, what the fuck? Like, why would she say that? So when my daughter sat up in the bed and she was saying that, in my heart, I knew it was my grandma. And I was like, I can't do anything for you, you know, like, I'm not the person. But it made me so angry to think that she was like going after my daughter. So I like start cussing a storm, you know, and like, get the fuck out of my fucking room, blah blah. Like, my mom has always told me, like, if you see something, a spirit, like, you're supposed to curse it, right? Curse at it, and supposedly it leaves. I don't know if it's true, but it worked. Like, when I said that, like, I remember as I was saying it, I could see my daughter's eyes, like her whole, like her eyes, her head, everything started turning like to the side. Oh my god, it's so fucking scary when I think about it. It started like turning and turning, like as if it's like watching this thing walk out of the room. I literally fucking died in that second. And I'm like, I start tripping the fuck out, you know? And I'm like, you know, calling my daughter's name. I'm like, wake up, you know, wake up. Mind you, she's like 2 now. And I'm like literally so pissed off. And like I start crying, and I'm like holding my daughter, and I'm like holding my son, you know? And I'm like, why would you come? I was more pissed off at that. I'm like, why would you come and scare my daughter? Or like, I felt like she was being selfish, even though it was like her afterlife. Because after my grandma passed, like a lot of things surfaced about things that she did, like while she was alive. Like that she was to like black magic, and she did a lot of things to people that she shouldn't have done. You know, my mom being one of them. So, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking like, dude, she fucking did something really bad, and she wants me to go, you know, take care of it for her. Like, no. After that, I had one more encounter happen, but when that happened, I would start dreaming of her, but I never would see her face, you know? Like, my dreams were always, I know it was her, because that same scary feeling that I got when I felt that thing come into that room that night, I would wake up literally screaming, terrified from these nightmares I would have of her. Yeah, they're not even dreams, they're nightmares. Where she would just be sitting in this black room. Not black, she would be all black. This dark room. And she would kind of cackle, like laughing at me. And when I would wake up, I would be so fucking terrified. You know, I'm like, I know, I'm sorry, I know it was my grandma, but whatever she did, I know it must have been something really bad. But I literally, ask God for her to never come to me. Like, I prayed so much, I pray for her soul. But it's just when I have those dreams of her, and I haven't, like, honestly, I would have them so, like, one after another. But now it's been like, probably like, it's been like a year that I haven't dreamed of her. And like, honestly, before I go to sleep, I always like try to pray and like pray that nothing ever comes, you know? Or nothing ever, I think it's a cricket. Or nothing ever like, or she just doesn't ever come back or try to haunt us, to be honest. Because I have a feeling that whatever she needed to tell me was something really bad. And I know that girl had told me that I would be able to withstand what she was going to tell me. But something tells me it was just terrifying. Like I said, I would love to find that girl, you know, that used to work in HR. And just like I have so many questions for her. But yeah, that was one of my experiences with a ghost. I mean, I've had plenty of experiences, but this one is one that literally traumatized me. And within the years as my daughter got older, like I learned that she too would see things, you know, or she would feel things. Like when I dream of her, when I dream of my grandma, or when I dream of her, my daughter dreams of her. And my daughter's so terrified, and you know, my daughter will wake up and she'll be like, Mom, like, she's so scary, like the way she comes in my dream. But I think I get afraid sometimes, thinking like, if she didn't get through to me, will she try to get through to my daughter?
The scariest stuff always got to be linked to animals for some reason. Like, you know that something is about to go wrong when you see a goat walking alone in the middle of the streets in the middle of the night. The story starts in Brazil, precisely in a place called Niterói. I hope I got it right. You see, in that place, there was a group of friends who wanted to get back home after that they spent the whole day together. The thing about this friend group is that they did not have a car, so they had to wait for a taxi or an Uber or whatever to pick them up, and this is where the story becomes scary. While they were waiting for a ride, they suddenly saw a goat walking slowly in front of them, so they were confused because you don't see this stuff every day. They were like, bro, are you seeing what I'm seeing right now? And one of them started filming this, going like, you see that thing over there? That's me, right? I'm the goat, you get it? Okay, that's not exactly what he said, but he ended up posting this video on his social media. 2 days later, after posting the video on his social media, he got some comments that he did not expect. You see, everybody was talking about a dark figure that appeared at the end of the video. So the guy who posted the video was so confused responding to these comments. He was like, what dark figure are y'all talking about? I don't see anything. So everybody responded, bro, you gotta be blind or something. You can literally see something over there. I still can't see anything. Alright, what about now? You can see something over here, clearly.
Ué, mano, do nada. Não pode, mano. Não pode, do nada.
Can clearly see something right here. Even the guy ended up by seeing it. It's undeniable. Now, some people might go like, oh my god, bro, this is so AI. No, it is not, and let me explain why. First of all, this video was not posted recently. It was posted in 2022. This is what AI looked like in 2022. Yes, it looked like shit. It was not realistic at all. Back then, AI did not know how to make videos, let alone adding something to an existing video. It was impossible. Second reason why this can't be AI or photoshopped or whatever is because if you notice well, even the goat turned his head to see. Even the goat noticed that something was over there. So yeah, nobody knows what exactly was this, but you just gotta know that if you see an animal that's in a place where he's not supposed to be, you gotta know that something is wrong.
Listen, y'all, if I'm going to be scared, y'all are going to be scared with me. It is time for another spooky story. I've been catching up on these DMs that y'all send me, and I have scared the ever-loving shit out of myself tonight. I have got to get this one off my chest before I go to bed. We are reading it straight from my DMs. Let's go. I want to be honest and let you know that I already sent this to other creators on TikTok and will probably send it to a few more. I'm just trying to get my story out there now and get some answers. I'm nervous even typing this, like it's wrong to talk about it, but I need answers. You can call me Ember. I used to live in a small town in Texas. My parents still live there today, and so does my brother and his wife, but I just cannot go back because of what happened this night. I want to mention, I don't know if it has anything to do with what I experienced, but I lost a brother years before this, and I saw him the night that he died. Afterward, I begged to see him one more time because I felt like I would die if I didn't. I now wonder if I somehow unknowingly opened a door that I should have left closed. Anyway, there's this little man-made old graveyard in the town that I'd been doing paranormal investigation in for years, just for fun. I'm not a pro or anything, but I've done enough of these at this graveyard and other places that I don't scare easy. Usually it's just quiet nights and cold spots, maybe a glimpse of something, nothing crazy. The place isn't big, only a few graves and some trees scattered around. There's no fence, it's pretty open and surrounded by bushes, trees, empty fields, and 2 little houses in the back that belong to the family that take care of the graveyard. I'd been there a bunch, both day and night. Like I said, I had been coming to this graveyard for years, and I knew every headstone by heart. That night, I'd been out there for a while already, a good 30 minutes, maybe longer. Everything was calm, nothing weird. Although, to be honest, from the time that I got there, something just didn't feel right, but I ignored it and continued my investigation. I was walking through toward the back, toward the houses again, when I noticed her standing near one of the trees. It threw me off because I hadn't seen her before, and I would have noticed somebody else walking around. It's open enough that you can see pretty much the whole place if you're standing anywhere in the graveyard. But she was just suddenly there, like she popped up out of nowhere. In the air, I don't quite know how to describe it, but it changed. It no longer felt safe. The slight breeze that had been happening that night stopped, like the wind itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen. She had on blue jeans and a blue hoodie. One of the few houses around had a light on outside, and it was hitting her from behind, so she was outlined in light, but her front was dark. I couldn't see her face at all. I remember feeling ridiculous because I immediately felt afraid. I noticed suddenly that everything had gone quiet. Even the crickets that had been chirping earlier went quiet. Mind you, I had been investigating haunted places by myself and with others for years, and I had never felt fear like this. This was like a primal, instinctual type of fear. Something about her felt off. But where I come from, when you show up to investigate somewhere and someone else is already there, it's just common courtesy to say hi, let them know that you're around so you don't mess with their investigation or accidentally scare them. So I did. I put my feelings aside, convinced myself I was being ridiculous, and I decided to talk to her. I said, "Hey," but I didn't get a response. So I tried again. I said, "Hey, sorry if I distracted you. I didn't know anyone else was here. Do you live in town?" And I kept talking to her, trying to be polite. I don't even remember what I was saying. I just remember her silence. Still nothing, no sound, no movement, just standing there. So I started walking a little bit backward the way that I'd come because, again, I had never felt fear and unease like that. I realized that the way she was holding herself did not seem normal. Don't get me wrong, she was standing there like a normal person, but she was tense. Unlike the way most people stand relaxed, it was like she was getting ready to lunge at me, and that's when she took one slow step toward me. My gut immediately went cold, like my brain hadn't caught up yet, but something in me knew that it was off. I took an immediate step back, and for just a couple seconds, we both stood there. Until it happened again. She stepped forward and I stepped back, and the only way I can describe it is the feeling of being prey. Y'all. I shined my flashlight at her and finally saw her face, or where her face should have been. There was nothing, just smooth skin, completely blank, with places where eyes and a nose and a mouth should have been but weren't, just smooth skin. Then she started moving fast, like running straight at me, and I took off. I have never run that fast in my life. I could hear her footsteps behind me getting closer every time that I looked back until I got to my house. I also want to mention that this is a man-made graveyard, so it is not smooth. It is very uneven ground, and it is not uncommon to trip a lot, and that's what I was doing, but I never heard this lady, quote-unquote, trip one time. I reached my porch and turned around, and she was gone. Just the trees, the neighbors' houses, and the empty streets. But the stillness and quiet was still there. I stood there shaking, trying to breathe, because I had been doing this kind of thing for years, and nothing has ever scared me like that woman did. I went back the next morning in daylight. Everything looked normal again, but it still did not feel right. The air felt heavier, just like the night before. I haven't gone back since that day. In fact, I moved away a few months later, and I don't go ghost hunting anymore. Y'all, somebody need to go buy them googly eyes from the Dollar Tree and an eyebrow pencil, because how are you going to walk around with no face? Like, how you got the whole grained audacity to walk around with no face? That is so scary. And actually, from what I can remember, we've told a lot of scary stories on this page. There was a story that a woman sent me last year that I told. She has MS, and she had a bad relapse with her MS, so she was like paralyzed from the waist down. She's in a rehabilitation facility trying to recover from this relapse, and her family had like given her this get well soon balloon that she has like tied to her bedside. She's taking a nap one day, and I'm leaving out a lot of detail, but she's taking a nap one day, and she wakes up because somebody is literally on top of her in the bed all of a sudden, trying to smother her with her own balloon. And she is like, imagine this, you're literally paralyzed from the waist down. Like, how horrifying. She is trying so hard to get this person off of her, and when she is finally able to move this balloon enough to see who her attacker is, it is a little boy with no face. Described exactly how Ember describes this woman in the story. And she said something like, "Get out, you're not welcome here," and he just disappears. She said this experience was like traumatizing for her, as I'm sure Ember's was for her. Like, she's literally not returned to Texas because of this. I can't imagine. I'm literally like scared just reading it. I would sooner air fry myself like a freaking taquito than to have to see some shit like that. You guys send me your spooky stories, and I will catch you in the next one.
One ghost photo's great, but I have 3, all from Myrtle's plantation. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time. Fright Night Files. I don't think anyone has ever heard the name plantation or the word plantation and thought of anything pleasant, but this one is exceptionally sad. If you've heard of Myrtle's plantation, then you've heard of Chloe. But have you heard about the children that also lived there and passed away? Well, if not, I'm about to tell you, because I've got a photo of one of the little girls. 2 photos of one of the little girls. To tell this story, I have to tell about Chloe, and Chloe was a woman, an African-American woman that worked for the family against her will. I cannot say the actual word of what she was, or certain platforms won't post it, but yes, that's what she was, and she was caught eavesdropping on the owner of the home, and he removed one of her ears, and she is said to be seen wearing like a green turban around her head, but to try to get back into good graces with the family, she was going to make them unwell and then heal them, and she made them a little too sick, and the mother and the 2 children ended up passing away. Well, now they're all said to haunt the home, and there's a mirror in the house that is said to show the ghost, show handprints, all the stuff. So someone sent me a photo they found on the internet of a girl supposedly captured in that mirror, and then in that comment section they said that this other photo was posted that looks to also be the little girl but walking away. So I'm going to show you now, and you tell me what you think. So here's the first photo. You can see the little girl here. She has like wavy curly hair, and a lot of people say that that up in the corner is a ghost, but it's not. It's just her reflection, and the face is like distorted or whatever. But this little girl that showed up in the photo was not there when the photo was taken, according to the original poster. And then in the comment section of this, from what I'm told, was this photo. And you can see the little girl right here is like passing through someone else. There's like a girl standing here. Do you see like her behind it? There's like a girl behind. They think that that's like one girl, and then another girl passing through. But you notice the curly hair? So there's like two girls standing here. And you see how it was taken during a time when they still had to wear a mask and everything. So what do you think? Pretty convincing. Right now you're probably thinking, hey, that was only 2 photos. You said you had 3, and I do. But if you want to see the third one that's better than these 2, you're going to have to tell me in the comments. And let me know which one of these 2 you think is most believable, or which one you think is believable, or which one you think is the scariest. But you're really going to want to see this other one.
Y'all remember that movie Children of the Corn? I spoke to my cousin today and she just reminded me of this crazy scenario that we went through down in West Virginia. I remember we were down in West Virginia and we were actually visiting a friend of hers, and we came across this cornfield that was just a huge farm. I mean, one of those where it just looked like it went for miles of corn. We grew up on scary movies. We loved Children of the Corn, so we were young, we were stupid, and we were like, yeah, let's go explore this cornfield. Mind you, we weren't really looking for any trouble, but we were being really silly out there. Just a quick funny part, I remember her jumping onto the corn thinking the corn stalks were gonna catch her, and they did not. So she got up laughing, we both started walking deeper into the corn, and as I noticed above, it was eventually going to start storming. The issue is the farther you ran, the more you lost track of where you parked your car back on the road. It was very easy to get lost and like twist and turn in there and not remember which direction you came from. That was very stupid of us. But we sit there together and we start brainstorming on maybe like which direction to go, and then we realize that she left her phone in the car. So I had an idea to track the location of her phone so we can start finding our way out. As we're sitting there brainstorming, trying to find a location, you literally hear it sounded like things were running around us, and we know the difference between 4 feet and 2 feet. We both look at each other, and because of all the scary movies we watched as a kid, we immediately knew something was wrong. Now we are running back in the direction of the location of her phone, and the crazy thing is that it kept glitching. I don't know if it was the storm, but it kept leading us in different directions. The direction not where the car was. Now mind you, we were only like 17 or 18 years old, so both of us are literally crying because we're being followed by people. I don't know who they were. I don't know if we pissed off farmers. I don't know what it was, but they weren't speaking. They were just running behind us. Crazy thing is we couldn't see anybody every time we looked behind us. It only sounded like footsteps were running up behind us, getting closer. Eventually, as we are running, I start to see an opening towards the end of the field, and I'm like, dude, that's gotta be the road. Let's get to the car. We start hauling ass as fast as we could out towards the direction of the car. We literally dove headfirst out of that cornfield. By the time we got to the car and we sat in the door, we both looked behind us, and this is what we saw. We thought we were going crazy at first, thought we were hearing shit, until we turned around and looked, and what it looked like was somebody tall in a flannel, like a brown and white flannel. It looked like all you saw was their arm turned and like they just disappeared back into the corn. And by that point, we realized, oh my god, we were being chased. We don't know if it was like Children of the Corn, but I do know that there was somebody in there who had sinister intentions. All I can say is what I say in a lot of my other videos, guys. There's only one thing scarier than animals out in the wilderness and places, and that's people.
You're probably familiar with the term 6'7", because it has become this popular trend amongst the younger generation. But a lot of people don't realize that 6'7" has been often associated with paranormal encounters. Now, there was a woman named Molly. Molly said that her son picked up the trend of saying 6'7", and he would say 6'7" after everything. And eventually it got to the point where she was annoyed. So she tells her son, you can say it at school, you can say it around your friends, but I do not want to hear you say it around me. So she goes home one day and she is sitting in the living room. She started to hear her son saying 6'7", 6'7", 6'7". So she got up, she walked into her son's room, and she said, what's going on? Like, I told you not to say that number anymore. Like, it's annoying. Please stop. And her son's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I did not say that. She's like, okay, whatever. Just don't say it anymore. A couple days later, she is sitting in the living room again, and she sees a shadow go by. And she starts hearing 6'7", 6'7", 6'7", 6'7", over and over again. So she gets up, she goes to her son's room, and she's like, I told you, stop saying that. Like, it's annoying. Please stop. And once again, her son pleads with her, like, I did not say that. So it keeps happening over and over again. And this one particular day, she comes home from work, she goes into the kitchen, and on the refrigerator, there are these letter magnets. And she discovers that spelled out on the fridge with these magnets is 67DIE. So she runs into her son's room immediately and she's like, okay, this has got to stop. Like, it is getting crazy. Like, you need to stop saying this word and, like, stop messing around because it's not funny. And once again, he says, Mom, I promise you I am not doing this. So she grounds him. Later that night, she's in bed. And she turns over and she looks out at the doorway. She sees her son standing in the doorway. And he's just staring at her. And she's like, okay, yeah, can I help you? And he turns around, walks down the hallway. So the next morning, she asks her son, what did you want? Why did you come to my room? And he's like, Mom, like, I didn't do that. Like, that, I don't know what you're talking about. A couple weeks after this, she is in the kitchen. And all of a sudden, her son comes through the kitchen door, stands right by her, and he looks at her. But that's when she realizes, like, her son looks completely different. Like, something is off about him. And that's when he starts to say, 6-7, 6-7, 6-7, 6-7, 6-7, 6-7. And his voice got deeper and deeper and sort of darker as he said that. And she starts screaming because she's terrified. She knows this isn't her son. Her son comes running out of his bedroom into the kitchen. She grabs him, embraces him, and is like, look, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you. And I know that it wasn't you saying that number. So she tells him, like, what had happened. And they both agreed that that number would never be mentioned again in their house. Did you know that Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is based on a real place called Avery Island? It's located in the Appalachian swamp in Louisiana. And this place is known for legends of pirates, witches, voodoo magic, and even ghosts. Now, situated in southern Louisiana on the bayou lies Avery Island. This place is an old pepper plantation. And in fact, one of the plantations that's found on this property is the house used in the Scooby-Doo movie. And very similar to the movie, there are legends of witches, Confederate soldiers, and even zombies. Now, there was a story of these two girls that goes back 100 years, Odette and Agnes. Now, a lot of people spoke during this time that there was a witch located in the swamp. And many of the young children in the area would often talk about this witch. And it's said that this young woman named Odette and her friend Agnes decided one night that they were going to go and look for the witch of the swamp. So they build this small raft and they head off down this channel. And as they go deeper and deeper into the swamp, they start to notice a lot of the trees are covered in the Spanish moss. And they see the giant roots of the tupelo trees sticking up from the water. They hear the sounds of the frogs and the gators, and it's almost as if this swamp is fully alive and living. And as they make their way down this channel, they start to get into a deeper area where the trees and the foliage was very thick. And that's when Odette starts to get this really bad feeling, like something was wrong. So she looks at Agnes and says, maybe we should turn back. And Agnes, who is just as afraid of what's going on as her, says, yes, I agree, like, let's turn around. But right at that moment, they hear this loud splash in the water behind them. And as they look to the back of the swamp, they see ripples in the water. And that's when they notice the swamp went completely quiet. And all they could hear was the ripples of this water moving closer and closer towards them. And the next thing they know, the raft began to shake violently, and they are flung into the water. So they swim frantically to the shore. And now, as they get onto this muddy ground, they begin to see a head peer from beneath the depths. And out of the water steps this woman who's covered in Spanish moss. Her skin is decaying and rotten. She has these bright yellow eyes, and she seems to almost hover above the water. And as she moves closer and closer to them, these two girls begin to panic. Odette takes off running, and as she's running away, she begins to hear screams from Agnes, and she knows whatever this is, it has her friend. But she continued on until she made it back to her village. And she tells everybody in town what had happened. They sent out a search party, and for weeks they looked for this young girl, and they never found her. But there were whispers that it was attributed to the witch of the swamp. Every culture across the world has some story or legend of the boogeyman. Could he actually be real? Now, there was this woman named Catherine. Catherine was from Cincinnati, Ohio. And she had this 6-year-old son named Douglas. For many years, Douglas was waking up in the middle of the night, screaming and running into her bedroom. and she could not figure out why. She took him to many doctors and specialists. They ran all kinds of tests, but they could find nothing wrong. So one day, she's sitting with Douglas, and she begins to have a conversation with him. She says, Douglas, why do you think you wake up in the middle of the night screaming? Like, do you have nightmares? What's going on? And she said, well, Mommy, I see a man in my closet every night. And she's like, Douglas, like, what do you mean? He goes, well, there's this man in my closet, and every night I see him standing there. And she goes, what does he look like? He says, well, he has this really white hair and this blue skin and these sharp teeth and these bright yellow eyes. And she goes, well, like, what happens when you see him? And he says, well, I wake up and I always hear the closet door open. And then I hear a voice saying, Douglas, Douglas, come in here. It's time to play. And I don't respond. I don't talk to him, but he keeps on talking to me. He keeps telling me to come to the closet. But I don't. I just stay in bed. And that's when the door opens and I see him. And he's scary. And that's why I scream and I run into your room at night. And so Catherine, hearing this, is just kind of overwhelmed. Like, what is going on? But she thinks this has to be a nightmare. Until one night, she is walking down the hallway. And she overhears some sound coming from her son's room. And as she goes up to the door and she starts to listen, she begins to hear someone talking. But it's not Douglas. And when she opens the door, she sees her son sitting up in the bed. And she says, who are you talking to? And he says, Mommy, the man in the closet. And when she looks over at the closet door, it is wide open. And she starts noticing, wait a second, every night I close his closet door because it's always open. And in the morning again, that closet door is open. Several months pass, and then one day she is home alone. And her son is at school. And she says, she was downstairs doing some cleaning when she heard a noise come from upstairs. So she goes up the stairs, she goes down the hallway, and this sound, it's like a tapping sound. It's coming from Douglas's room. She said as she went into his bedroom, she sees that the closet door is slightly cracked, and she can hear the tapping sound. As she goes over to the door, she grabs the handle, and she opens it up. There is the man standing there in the closet. And it was exactly as Douglas had described him. White, long hair, this blue skin, these sharp teeth, and these yellow eyes. She screams, she runs out of the house, and they move out that day.
I stayed at my brother's house after an abusive relationship, and I don't think we were there alone. So I moved in with my brother and his girlfriend just for a little while, just until I got back onto my feet after getting out of an abusive relationship. My brother works out of town, and his girlfriend follows him sometimes, and so I ended up being there alone with my daughter a lot. But this actually started before they left out of town. There was a lot of nights that I stayed up late. I had a really hard time sleeping, and eventually I started to hear a woman's voice. At first I thought it was just my brother's girlfriend. It was very, very faint. I couldn't make out what it was saying. Then I would start to hear footsteps, and it would pace up and down the hallway, and I would look out to check, and nothing was ever there. It got worse after my brother went out of town. Things I knew that I would set down would be in a completely different spot. The voice didn't stop, and it was strange because it never sounded like it was in the same specific spot. Like, I'd walk into one room thinking it came from there, but it didn't. At one point, I even checked outside to see if something was there. At one point, I even wondered if it was my daughter, but she would always deny it, and I started to get so frustrated because I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew I was hearing something. There was one day I was in my brother's roommate's room, and I was using the laptop trying to enroll my daughter into school. They had a big TV in the corner, and it showed good reflection when it was off. And I remember just feeling like something or somebody was watching me, and so I looked up at the TV, and there it was, a figure in the background by the doorway of somebody standing there. I turned around immediately, and I saw a man walk past the door and down the hallway. I panicked, I went and I checked, and he was gone. I was about to call the police, but I checked the entire place and nobody was there. I told my best friend, and she just kind of laughed it off, and she said, "It's probably just a ghost, like, don't worry about it." I couldn't not worry about it. I started looking things up online, and I came across a preacher that was giving me step-by-steps how to get something out of the house that wasn't wanted if it was paranormal. I turned the video up loud, and I went around walking around the house, telling it it's not welcome to be there. The next night, I was coming home from a late night shift at the bar. I got home around 2 a.m., and everything was pretty quiet. I went into the bathroom, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. And it was a figure going across the bathroom shower. It was like you could see it through the shower curtain, and they were on the inside. I ran out of my house and I went to my car, and I tried calling anybody that I thought would be awake. After a while, I wound up coming back, and I was sitting in my car eating food, just trying to calm myself down, and then I saw out of my eyesight the porch light turned off. That light can only be turned off from the inside. I tried really hard to rationalize it in my brain, like maybe the bulb just blew, but then I saw him in my car mirror. He was walking towards my car. I threw my car in reverse so fast and backed out of there. I texted my brother's girlfriend and I said, "Your dad's house is haunted." After that, she started to tell me everything. She told me everything she experienced and she heard growing up. She told her parents for years, and they never believed her. I will never stay in that house again. Later on, my brother actually admitted that he heard things too, and so did his roommates, but they never saw anything.
In Texas, there is this place known as the Dogman Triangle. And the Dogman Triangle is this triangle-shaped area between Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. Now, this is a story that comes out of the Dogman Triangle. There was this man named Kiko, and Kiko lived in Dallas, and he said when he was younger, him and his buddies decided they were going to go camping. Now, they went to this campground that was about 40 miles south of Dallas, and he said when they got there, they set up their campsite, and then they decided they were going to go hike around the area. Well, as they were hiking, they stumbled upon these weird stone structures in the middle of the woods. One of Kiko's friends is like, "Hey, I got some spray paint in my backpack. Do you want to tag these like rocks?" And so they end up spray painting all of these rock structures. Well, Kiko said, that he felt bad about this, that whatever they had done, it, had disturbed something, and he could feel it. Now, he had spray painted buildings and, trains, but he said this felt like something different. Well, later on, they're back at their campsite and they're having this like huge fire. And the next thing Kiko knows, like his buddy is talking, but he can't hear him. And he notices, like, I can't hear any insects, like I can't hear the fire. It just got extremely quiet. The next thing he knows, he looks over into the woods and he sees these two like amber colored yellow eyes looking at him. And he can see the outline of what looked like a very skinny man. And he said all of a sudden, like the sound came back, he could hear his friend and the fire, but whatever that was, it was gone. So later on, they go to bed and they're in their tents. Kiko wakes up, he has to go to the bathroom. He gets outside of his tent and he goes a little distance away from the campsite. He starts going to the bathroom. And when he's done, he realizes, wait a second, like I can't hear anything again. Like it's completely quiet. He turns around and standing about 20 feet away is something like hunched over, standing on all fours. And he said it looked like it was doing something. So he took 2 steps closer and he could see whatever this was like eating a deer. The next thing he knows, he said this thing stood up on 2 legs and it had the body of a very skinny man, but the face of a wolf. And he said it just looked at him with these amber yellow colored eyes, just staring at him. And then it turned, it picked up the deer, threw it over its shoulder, and it ran off into the woods. So Kiko immediately goes back to the tent. He's like freaked out, telling his friends like, we need to leave, we need to leave. They're like, everything's going to be all right, everything's all right, you're just dreaming. Well, fast forward to the morning, they, hightail it out of there because he's, pretty bothered by this. Well, Kiko said he remembered something that his grandfather always used to tell him. He said the woods were like, a living being. And like a living person, right? When it stops talking, when it goes quiet, you know something is wrong.
You ever had that family member that never gets scared of anything, but when they do, that's how you know something's really wrong? I'm going to tell you this really creepy situation I got into with my brother, my dad, and my uncle. Brother easily gets scared. My dad and my uncle, they never get scared. But this time, they got scared. The story takes place back in New Jersey on this long, windy road that goes through the woods called Pleasant Valley Road. This is the type of scenario that you never thought you would encounter, and it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. So we're driving down this long, windy road called Pleasant Valley Road, and it's probably around 9 o'clock at night. It's just starting to get dark, and it's summertime. And I remember that when we were coming around this long bend, it just started to straighten out right before my Uncle Ricky was like, Walt, stop. I will never forget what I saw that night. And basically, about 150, maybe 150 feet ahead of us in the headlights was a person sitting on, the middle of the road, you got the two yellow lines. This person had their hoodie pulled up and they were sitting Indian style, facing the opposite direction of us. So all you saw was this person sitting with their hoodie pulled up just about 100 feet or so ahead of us, just sitting there in the dark by himself. Of course, we were kind of curious, like, what do we do in this situation? But my uncle looks at us and he just taps Walt, my dad, on the shoulder. He's like, Walt, turn around right now. There was many things to think of in this situation. Like, we thought maybe it was like a crazy person. My Uncle Ricky said that he thought it was an ambush. Somebody was sitting there on purpose that hopefully a car would stop and we would try to help them, and then maybe his friends would just come jumping out of the woods to steal and kill us and steal our car. I don't know, man. Either way, it's still really freaking creepy. Like I always say, guys, there's only one thing scarier than animals out in the woods, and that's people.
I do not have new scary pictures to show you today, and that's because I have real paranormal videos sent in by my followers. As if this series couldn't get any creepier. One evening, my brother came to me, his voice trembling, claiming that he had heard something moving both inside and outside of our house. At first, I thought he was just being paranoid, but the unease in his eyes sparked my curiosity. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to check the security cameras I had installed around the property. As I scrolled through the footage, my heart raced. Suddenly, I saw it, a dark shadow, running past the camera outside, almost too fast to register. It sent a deep chill through me, the kind that wraps around your spine and grips your heart. This is a video of my friends and I, and this happened around 12:40 in the afternoon. My friends and I were swimming, having fun in the pool, when suddenly we captured something black passing by in our video. Thank you guys so much for sending in your videos and your pictures and your stories. And if you're watching and you have something to share, be it a picture, video, story, whatever, my email is listed in my bio as well as in the caption of this video.
On Sunday afternoon, March 12, 2006, 39-year-old Michael Zimedi Jr. drove his ATV across a frozen lake in Freedom, New Hampshire. And even though it was really cold and the air burned his cheeks and his lungs, Mike smiled as he drove. He really just loved it here. Most of the time, Mike lived 2 hours away in the town of Wakefield, Massachusetts. But he'd been coming to Freedom, New Hampshire for years because his parents had a vacation house here. And so this tiny lakeside community had always felt like a second home and a peaceful retreat. And Mike had recently bought his own vacation house in Freedom just down the street from his parents. And the purchase had been a really big deal for him. He ran a cement contracting company called Allstate Concrete Pumping, and he'd worked really hard for many years to build up a nice life for his wife Michelle and their 3 kids. And in many ways, the purchase of the second house was proof that he'd done it. But his work with the concrete company had also created some issues in his marriage. Being in charge of a company meant a lot of responsibility and long hours. So Michelle and the kids were on their own quite a bit, which meant Michelle had to do most of the parenting and most of the household stuff. And she'd recently made it clear that Mike being gone all the time, despite how successful he was still really hard on her. Now, out on the lake, as Mike was kind of thinking about his whole life, Mike could see another ATV coming toward him. And as it got closer, he could see that the driver of the ATV was the other problem in his marriage, Sean Fitzpatrick. So Sean was one of their neighbors on the lake, and he'd been a close friend of the family for years. He was retired, and he lived in freedom year-round, and when the Zimedis were there, he'd come over for dinners or barbecues or to take their kids boating out on the lake. He was around so much that Mike's kids actually called him Uncle Sean. But last summer, Mike had found out that his wife Michelle had cheated on him with Sean. Mike had been obviously completely devastated, but he and Michelle had both agreed not to give up on their marriage and had been going to therapy together ever since. And in terms of Mike and Sean's relationship, well, Mike still hadn't actually spoken to Sean since finding out about the affair, because mostly he just hated confrontation. It had been easier for him to avoid Sean and focus on rebuilding his relationship with Michelle. So seeing Sean now made Mike want to just turn around and speed off in the other direction. But Mike could see that Sean was already waving him down, so he came to a stop and waited there as Sean pulled his ATV up. And Sean did not beat around the bush. He immediately told Mike that he was glad he ran into him here because he'd been wanting to apologize about last summer and Michelle. It obviously wasn't okay, and he hoped they could just, put it behind them. And Mike, he was so surprised by how sincere Sean was being that he just said, you know what, it's all good. Which he didn't mean, because it definitely was not okay, but again, Mike's not a confrontational guy. All Mike really wanted to do here was get out of this interaction and get away from Sean, because this made him really uncomfortable. And also, he genuinely did need to leave basically right now, because he and Michelle and the kids were getting ready to head back to Wakefield soon, and he wanted to go help Michelle pack up. And so pretty quickly, Mike told Sean that he really had to go here, and then before, Sean could protest, Mike turned his ATV around and he gunned it back across the lake towards his house. About 15 minutes later, Mike walked into his house, and the first thing he saw was a bunch of suitcases all packed and sitting by the door. And he realized that, Michelle had already done all the work. But seconds later, Michelle came in and gave Mike a kiss. And she said, the kids were just finishing up cleaning their rooms and they could all head out in a few minutes. And then Mike heard the sound of a car beeping twice outside. And when he and his wife heard that, Michelle kind of rolled her eyes and laughed, because they both knew it was clearly Mike's parents. His parents had also been in freedom for this weekend at their house down the street. And they were also making the 2-hour drive back to Wakefield this afternoon. And Michelle was laughing because it amused her that neither Mike nor his father could manage to go a single day without talking to each other. So Mike's dad was also named Michael, and the name was not the only thing they shared. They were also best friends and co-workers. Michael Sr. owned the company that Mike ran, Allstate Concrete. So it was like a family operation, and Mike Jr. had never even thought of doing anything else. He jumped into the concrete business right out of high school, and he and his dad had been working together ever since. Now, the Allstate Concrete Company had had some struggles, just like any company would, including a lawsuit from a former employee that had been pretty stressful. But for the most part, the business was a huge success, and right now they were busier than ever, working on an enormous construction project in nearby Boston. So Mike headed outside to say hi to his parents and to talk a little business with his dad. He asked Mike Sr. if he'd called their employee, Chester Roberts, yet, because Mike and his dad had plans to be at the office first thing tomorrow morning, and Mike wanted Chester to be there too. Chester worked part-time for them as a driver and also handyman, and he was easily the most reliable employee that they had. So whenever they had a packed week ahead, they always called Chester in. And to Mike Jr.'s relief, Mike Sr. said yes, he'd already spoken to Chester, and they were good to go. So eventually, they all said their goodbyes, and Mike Jr. told his dad he would see him tomorrow. Just before 8 a.m. the next morning, Monday, March 13th, Mike Jr. pulled his truck into the parking lot of Allstate Concrete. He was right on time. He could see he was the first vehicle there, so he got out and hustled across the lot because it was raining, and he unlocked a side door by one of the garage doors. So the Allstate building was basically just a massive garage with 3 huge roll-up doors for their cement trucks to pull into. But it also had an upstairs office where Mike and his father did all their administrative work. And so after Mike went in through the side door into the big garage, He headed up a set of steps that led to his office on the second level. And when he got there, he sat in his desk chair and started going over the week's logistics. And just a few minutes later, he heard another vehicle pull into the lot outside. Mike figured that very likely this was his father, because Chester often came to the office on foot. Then Mike Jr. heard the downstairs door open and footsteps coming up the stairs. A few minutes later, Mike's father, Mike Sr., pulled his truck into the Allstate concrete parking lot and parked next to his son's truck. He hopped out and walked quickly to the building's side door to get out of the rain, but when he tried to push open the side door, it got stuck on something and wouldn't open all the way. So he looked through the crack to see what was blocking the door, and he froze, because there was clearly a man lying face down inside of the building in a huge pool of blood. Now, it was dark inside the building, and so Michael Sr. could not see the man's face. He had no idea who this guy was. But whoever it was, he knew sort of instinctively that it was not his son. Mike Jr. was a big guy, and even in the dark, it was clear this man had a different build. And so Michael Sr.'s heart was pounding now, and all he could think to do was just back away, grab his cell phone, and call 911. However, after Michael Sr. got off the phone with the dispatcher and they said they were sending people over now, Mike Sr. realized he couldn't just wait for the police to get there. I mean, there was clearly someone either very badly hurt or dead in his garage, and his son was likely somewhere inside too. I mean, his truck was here, and so he had to go in and make sure his son was okay. So Michael Sr. walked away from the blocked door where he had been standing when he called the police, and he pulled up one of the big roll-up garage doors. And once it was open, he didn't see anyone. He just ran inside and began frantically screaming his son's name. But Mike Jr. didn't answer, and there was no sign of him anywhere. So eventually, Mike Sr. ran to the staircase and went up to the second floor office. And as soon as Mike Sr. barged into the office, he stopped in horror. Because there, sitting slumped in the desk chair, was the blood-covered body of his son. Over an hour later, Massachusetts State Trooper Kevin Baker pulled up in front of Allstate Concrete. He could see the large building was already roped off with caution tape, and there were a dozen or more crime scene techs and officers with the Wakefield Police Department who were moving in and out of an open garage door collecting evidence. So Baker was not a part of the Wakefield Police Department. He was with the state police. But in Massachusetts, state troopers conduct homicide investigations right alongside local authorities. And Baker had a feeling that this case would definitely need his help. Because Wakefield, they didn't get many homicides. The town was about 10 miles north of Boston and had a reputation as being a really peaceful and safe place. The kind of small town where everyone actually knew each other. Baker got out of his cruiser and looked around for whoever was in charge. And he didn't have to wait long, because an officer hurried up to him and introduced himself as Detective Richard Cass with the Wakefield Police Department. Cass told Baker to follow him, and as they walked towards the open garage door, he quickly briefed Baker up on the situation. There were 2 male victims inside, and both were deceased. They'd both been shot, and they had been found by the company's owner, Michael Zimedi Sr., a little after 8 a.m. Baker followed Cass into the garage and over to the first body, which was face down on the floor just inside a smaller side door. Cass explained that this victim was 51-year-old Chester Roberts, a part-time truck driver for Allstate. It hadn't been difficult to identify him because Chester did a lot of handiwork around town and was known by all the locals, including Detective Cass himself. When Baker went to the body, he could tell right away that Chester had been shot in the back. It was a single shot, and most likely was from a shotgun, since clearly there was a blast radius where there was like a spray effect with a lot of little pellets that entered his body. Chester had no other visible injuries, including no defensive injuries. And when Baker stood and looked around the garage, he also didn't see anything that pointed to a robbery or any kind of struggle. There was pretty pricey-looking equipment just sitting around, and nothing was toppled over or obviously out of place. So Baker guessed that Chester's killer had likely snuck up on him and shot him in the back before he even had a chance to turn around. Baker spent a couple more minutes looking around at the doors and the windows, and again, didn't see any signs of, forced entry or anything out of the ordinary, but that didn't mean much. Chester had likely opened up for the day and begun work, and the killer had just come in after him. And so after a few minutes, when Baker was done looking around the first floor, he told Cass he was ready to go up to the second floor to see the second body. Moments later, Cass led Baker into the second floor office, where the body of 39-year-old Mike Zimedi Jr. had been found. Detective Cass said sadly that, just like with Chester, he knew Mike personally as well. Mike Jr. had not just been shot in the torso the way Chester had been shot. He had been shot in the face as well as in the chest. And the force of these shots had been so powerful that, like, his desk and surrounding paperwork were also all drenched in blood. And for the most part, Mike was basically unrecognizable. But what struck Baker the most was not just how gruesome this was. It was the fact that, Mike Jr. is still kind of slumped in his chair. He's in his office. Whoever did this, it's like they went in here to execute Mike, really intentionally. They marched in here, they didn't touch anything else, and they shot Mike right in the face with a shotgun before Mike could even get up. I mean, this seemed very intentional. Somebody came here to kill Mike. And so as Baker was thinking about that, he realized that this likely meant Mike Jr. was the one who actually got shot first, before Chester had even arrived at the building. Otherwise, Mike Jr. would have heard the gunshot downstairs, and he wouldn't have been so caught off guard sitting in his chair like this. And so again, if Mike was the first person shot, it just further suggested that he was the main target of this attack. The crime scene, of course was gruesome, but considering it was remarkably clean. I mean, there were no bloody footprints or any indication the killer had interacted with the scene. And the Zimedis did fit the mafia stereotype, an Italian-American family involved in construction. Baker told Cass what he was thinking, sort of as he was surveying the scene here. And Cass, as he heard this, he sort of had this thoughtful look come over his face. He said he knew the Zimedis pretty well, and Mike Jr. and his father were really good people. So he found it hard to believe they were involved in any kind of shady, mafia business deals. But he conceded that it was possible, especially since the Zimedis were contractors on a project called The Big Dig. And this made Baker immediately raise his eyebrows. So The Big Dig was literally the biggest construction project in the country and involved building a tunnel under the harbor in Boston. But it had been kind of like a total disaster, just a major headache for the city since it was way over budget and had been going on for 15 years and still wasn't done. This huge project had also been famously hampered by mafia dealings and corrupt payoffs. So now Baker had to wonder if the Zimedis had either been involved in these seedy deals or had maybe accidentally upset the wrong person while on the job. But even if the murders had nothing to do with the mob, Baker still thought it was very likely that the killer was somehow connected to their business. Somebody who maybe had worked at Allstate Concrete, or maybe who had been a client, and would know where Mike worked in the building, and that he'd be there early in the morning. And while the second victim, Chester, was probably not the primary target, Baker wasn't sure yet why he was also killed. He could have been killed because he was just at work at the wrong moment, or maybe he was wrapped up in the same conflict as the Zimedis. So for a moment, Baker just stood there staring at the scene, staring at the blood-soaked paperwork all over the desk. And then eventually he turned to Cass and said they would need a list of all of Allstate's employees and clients. Baker then spent some more time just kind of walking around the office looking for evidence, and he noticed a 16-gauge shotgun shell on the floor. So he grabbed a nearby tech and told her to bag it and see if she could locate any other shells. Baker and Cass then headed outside, where already a crowd of people were gathering outside around the outside of the police perimeter. Once they were outside, Trooper Baker asked Cass if they could start by speaking with the person who actually discovered the bodies, Michael Zimedi Sr. But Detective Cass shook his head and said no. He explained when he'd first gotten to the scene that Michael Sr. had been so distraught over his son's death that he could barely speak, so Cass had just sent him home. Another Wakefield police officer had done the same thing when Mike Jr.'s wife, Michelle Zimedi, showed up, totally hysterical, saying she had heard there was an accident, and they had told her that her husband was dead and taken her home too. Baker understood, but was not thrilled to hear this. He preferred to speak to witnesses and family really quickly and in person. In a murder, a spouse is always a suspect, so he was especially disappointed to have missed Michelle. But there was still plenty to do at the scene, and obviously the Wakefield police knew where the family could be found later. So Baker turned to Cass and suggested they just start canvassing the businesses nearby. The following morning, March 14th, Trooper Baker parked his car in front of Mike's parents' house in Wakefield. He was with Detective Cass, and they were there to speak with Mike Sr. They'd just gotten the autopsies back for both Chester and Mike, but they didn't reveal anything that they didn't already know. Chester had been shot once, Mike twice, and both died likely within seconds. But the investigators did have one potential lead from their canvass of the neighborhood. Even though they hadn't found any surveillance cameras at Allstate Concrete, Some businesses around Allstate had some. So Baker had some officers scrubbing through that footage now. He also had another team interviewing Chester Roberts' family, because there was still a chance that Baker had gotten this all wrong and maybe Chester was actually the target. Besides that, the crime techs had not found much physical evidence at the scene. There were no fingerprints, and since it had been raining, they hadn't been able to collect any footprints or car tracks from outside. So now, Baker reached up and knocked on the front door of the Zimedi's house, hoping that Mike Sr. would be able to point them in the right direction. A minute later, Baker and Cass sat in the living room with Mike Sr. and Pat, Mike's mom. Both of Mike's parents seemed incredibly emotional. Michael Sr. was visibly shaking, while Pat just cried. And seeing how upset they were now made Baker realize that Cass had made the right call in sending Michael Sr. home yesterday. Even 24 hours later, it was still going to be very hard to get any sort of real answer out of them because of how upset they were. So Baker decided he would just have to keep it really brief. The first thing he did is he asked Mike Sr. to just go over the actual discovery of the bodies. Tell me what happened. And what he said lined up with everything that Baker had heard from Cass and from dispatch. And so after Mike Sr. went over that, Baker moved on to the real reason he was there. He asked if there was anybody in Mike Jr.'s life who might have wanted to hurt him. Mike Sr. took a few shaky breaths as he thought about the question, and then he said that, there were a few people in the industry that he and his son did not necessarily get along with, but mostly they tried to have good relationships with everyone. Getting in fights was just bad business. But as he was saying this, Mike Sr. suddenly sat up straighter, like he just thought of something. And he said, actually, there was a former coworker who did definitely have a grudge against them. His nephew, Hank Jennings. Hank got mad at them a few years ago about unpaid overtime wages and actually filed a lawsuit against them. Now, they'd eventually paid Hank a settlement, but they still all hated each other. Mike Sr. looked over at his wife, Pat, and she just nodded and said the whole thing had been really high stress and very volatile. Baker took down Hank's information and talked with Mike's parents for just a few more minutes, and then he nodded to Cass, and they stood to leave. Baker knew he still needed to speak more to the Zimedis, but for now, he was going to give them a break, and instead, he and Cass would look into Hank. 2 days later, Baker sat in Cass's office at the Wakefield Police Department, poring over crime scene photos and witness statements. He was starting to get antsy. After meeting with Mike's parents, he'd been excited to speak with Hank Jennings, the disgruntled former employee who also happened to be Mike's cousin. But even though Baker and Cass had sent officers out to track Hank down for an interview, they hadn't been able to get a hold of him yet. However, they had gotten in touch with Mike's wife, Michelle, and had questioned her at her house in Wakefield, but she hadn't given them much. She said that she was at home with her kids at the time of her husband's death, and that she really didn't know of anybody who would want to hurt Mike Jr. Also, Baker and Cass had looked into Allstate Concrete's financial statements, and they had found nothing that suggested there was anything shady or mafia-related happening with the company. Still, Baker knew they were better off than they had been a few days ago, primarily because they had had a chance to review a bunch of the surveillance footage from the businesses around Allstate, and one of those security cameras had been aimed at the street right outside Allstate. Now, this angle didn't show the Allstate parking lot itself, but it did show everyone who entered and exited that parking lot from the street. So, this particular camera had picked up Mike Jr.'s truck arriving at work at 7:39 a.m., and then at 7:44 a.m., so 5 minutes later, an unknown green pickup truck pulled in as well. And then a few minutes after that, Chester Roberts was seen arriving at Allstate on foot. And then at 7:50, the green truck was seen again, leaving the parking lot, 12 minutes before Michael Sr.'s red truck arrived at 8:02. So, whoever the killer was, it looked like they had driven that green truck and had killed Mike and Chester between 7:44 a.m. and 7:50 a.m. The video wasn't clear enough to show the driver of this mysterious green truck or even see its plates, and it didn't actually show the driver of this vehicle, the killer, getting out of the vehicle and entering the building. But knowing the style and color of very likely the killer's vehicle would definitely help them narrow down potential suspects. Just then, the desk phone rang, and Baker watched as Cass grabbed it and said hello. And then Cass got a confused look on his face before he thanked the caller and said they'd be right over. He hung up and told Baker that was Michelle Zimedi, and she'd called to say that she had new information to give them, something that she hadn't mentioned in her first interview, and that it was really important. About 15 minutes later, Baker and Cass sat down across from Michelle in her living room for the second time.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
And to Baker, Michelle seemed very different from the last time they spoke. 2 days ago, she'd seemed horrified and grief-stricken. But now, she just seemed really nervous. She kept touching her hair and fiddling with the stack of condolence cards on the coffee table. Baker commented that there were a lot of cards, and Michelle just nodded. She said so many people had reached out and sent cards, all their friends and neighbors in Wakefield and in Freedom, New Hampshire, where their second home was. And then Michelle took a breath and just got straight to the reason that she had called them. She said that she had withheld information about one of her neighbors in Freedom. His name was Sean Fitzpatrick, and she'd had an affair with him. Baker cleared his throat in surprise and then asked her to go on. Michelle's eyes filled with tears as she explained how Mike Jr. worked so much and she and the kids spent a lot of time at their lake house, and so that meant they spent a lot of time with Sean. And eventually this friendship between Michelle and Sean had grown into a romance. Baker couldn't believe he was hearing this. A secret love triangle gave both Sean and Michelle plenty of motivation to want Mike dead. But before he could ask any follow-up questions, Michelle said her husband actually knew all about her affair and that they had been in therapy and they'd begun to completely turn their marriage around. So finally, a month ago, she'd officially totally broken things off with Sean, and Sean had been really upset about it. Baker shared a look with Cass and could tell they were both thinking the same thing. Obviously, they needed to speak to Sean immediately. But also, Michelle was now back to being a primary suspect too. Maybe she had wanted her husband out of the picture so she could be with Sean, and maybe the only reason she was telling them this was to get ahead of it. However, they would need a lot more evidence before they could prove any of that. So for now, Baker just got Sean's number and address from Michelle and told her they would be in touch. Later that night, Baker and Cass were once again inside of Cass's office, but this time they were there with another officer who was there to give them a crucial update. After speaking with Michelle, Baker had sent a team of officers up to Freedom, New Hampshire to speak with Sean, the neighbor she had been having an affair with. And now, one of those officers was back in Wakefield to tell them what he had learned. And the first thing Baker wanted to know was not about their conversation. It was just, did you see a green truck in Sean's driveway? But the officer shook his head and said Sean did own a truck, but it was bright red. Then he went on to say that when they had spoken to Sean, he had completely denied having an affair with Michelle. Sean had admitted that he had dated a lot of girls, but he'd insisted that he and Michelle were just close family friends. Now, the officers who were there speaking to Sean just stood there and let Sean talk, never telling him that they already knew that Michelle fully admitted to them having an affair, and they knew Sean was lying here. Baker almost laughed when he heard this, because he did not believe Sean at all. And if he was lying like he appeared to be, that made him seem pretty guilty. But before he could say so, the officer added one more thing. He said Sean actually had a solid alibi. He'd been at home on the morning of the murders, and one of his neighbors had actually confirmed it. This particular neighbor took her morning walk every day at 9 a.m., and she'd seen Sean outside his house right around then. Baker sighed. It took around 2 hours to drive between Freedom and Wakefield, so Sean would not have had enough time to kill Mike and Chester by 7:50 a.m. and then get to Freedom by 9. And so suddenly, Sean Fitzpatrick felt like another very promising dead end. On March 18th, so 5 days after the murders of Mike Zimedi and Chester Roberts, Detectives Baker and Cass stood at the back of a church in Wakefield, Massachusetts. They were there for Mike's funeral, and the church was absolutely packed. But the investigators were not just there to pay their respects. They were also there to speak to Hank Jennings, the cousin of Mike who had filed that lawsuit against the concrete company. Since by that point they still had not been able to officially get a hold of Hank, Cass had suggested that they just corner him at Mike's funeral, which he was very likely to attend because, despite his rift with the Zimedis, he was still family. And when the service wrapped up and everybody stood to leave, Baker felt a nudge on his arm. Cass leaned over and whispered that they'd been right, and he pointed out Hank right in the crowd. So, as the attendees started filing out of the church, the investigators pushed their way over to Hank and got in front of him just before he could step outside. Baker immediately noticed that Hank's whole body went tense when they blocked his way, like he wanted to try to make a run for it. So Baker just cut to the chase, and he said, "Hank, will you come with us and speak to us, please?" And Hank's eyes got really wide, and he just said, "No way, not without his lawyer." Then he pushed past the investigators and hurried outside. Baker and Cass didn't follow him. Instead, they just exchanged a look, because they knew now that Hank was obviously their primary suspect. 5 weeks after the funeral, in mid-April of 2006, State Trooper Kevin Baker sat in Detective Cass's office in the Wakefield Police Department. He was wearing gloves, and he was holding a piece of paper that looked like an old-fashioned ransom note. It was covered in letters that had been clearly cut out of a newspaper, and it spelled out a very alarming message. Close business now, or more family will die. This message had been brought to them by Mike Jr.'s mother, Pat, who said they had received it in the mail that morning. For the Zimedis, for so many reasons, this letter was terrifying. It was not just a reminder of their son's murder, but also a promise that there would be more violence. But for Baker, the note was a lead, which they really needed, because it had been over a month since Michael and Chester were killed, and at this point, the two investigators had managed to rule out basically every one of their suspects, and that included Hank Jennings. They'd learned that Hank's clear reluctance to meet with them was not because of guilt. It was because he had signed a non-disclosure agreement during the settlement with the Zimedis and didn't want to break it. And when they did finally speak to him, he clearly had an alibi.
And even though she had passed, I saw her again. I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you'd like to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. Back in 2016, my mom was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. At first, it felt like something that we could all fight, something that we could get through. But about a year later, unfortunately, everything changed. Doctors had found 3 lesions in her brain. And from that point on, it was like we were just waiting for time to run out. 2 years after her diagnosis, she passed away. It was the summer of 2018. We had only been living in the Irish countryside for a few months when it happened, and I remember the morning so clearly. It was bright. The kind of sunny day that you can't help but feel wrong amidst something terrible that's happening. My dad told me the news early that morning, and I didn't cry, not at first. I just couldn't process it. It didn't feel real. So I went outside and sat in the back garden, trying to make sense of something, anything, because what was happening to me just didn't. I sat there, staring ahead, feeling completely numb, and that's when I noticed it. My shadow. It was cast long across the grass because of the way the sun was hitting behind me. And at first I wasn't really paying attention to it. But then I looked a little closer. I don't know how to explain this in a way that sounds even a little bit logical, but the outline of my face wasn't mine. The silhouette, the shape of the nose, the curve of the forehead, it looked exactly like my mom. And the thing is, I don't really look like her. I take after my dad more than anything, but this shadow, it wasn't me. It was her. I remember just staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, tilting my head slightly, shifting my position, but no matter how I moved, it still looked just like her, clear as day, and for a second, it didn't even feel scary. It felt impossible, like my brain was trying to show me something that I shouldn't be able to see. Eventually, I looked away. I told myself that it was grief, that it was shock, that it was my mind just trying to cope. But what happened next made all of my explanations feel a lot less convincing. My dog suddenly started barking. Not excited, not playful, but alert and focused. It had noticed something that nobody else had, and it was staring towards the back door. The door was open, leading into the kitchen, and whatever my dog was reacting to was inside. So I stood up and walked over, slowly, with each step trying to figure out what it could possibly be. At first, when I looked in, I didn't see anything. The kitchen looked completely normal, empty, but then I heard it. A small sound, coming from just behind the door. There was an empty trash can sitting there, and the noise was coming from inside it. My dog wouldn't get any closer. It stayed back, tense and watching, so I stepped forward, carefully, and I looked inside, and at the very bottom of the empty bin was a tiny shrew, small and fragile, running in frantic little circles, trying to climb the smooth sides to get out. And here's why that moment hit me like a ton of bricks. It was because my dad used to call my mom Shrew as a nickname. He'd always joke that she had a cute little pointy nose just like one. It was one of those small random things that you don't think about much until you're forced to, because this particular day just wasn't any other day. It was the morning after she had died, and somehow there was a shrew trapped inside of our bin in our kitchen. When I got to thinking, it just didn't make any sense. The bin was tall, completely empty. There was no trash in it. Realistically, nothing could have climbed on it to get in or out. There was no clear way it could have ended up there. It should have been impossible. I called my dad in. He came into the kitchen and saw it, and without hesitation, gently picked it up. He's always been really good with animals, and he was careful and calm. He carried it outside and released it back into the garden, and that was it. We didn't talk about it. We didn't react. We didn't try to explain. We just stood there in silence, but later, we both acknowledged how strange it was. My dad isn't the type to believe in anything supernatural. He's always been a very grounded man, very logical, but even he couldn't explain it. And I know that grief can do strange things to the mind. It could have very well been the reason why I saw my mother's face in my shadow. But the shrew, that was very much real. My dad saw it too, and to this day, neither of us have any explanation. And it's the only one that I've ever seen in my life. And I live out in the countryside where there are animals everywhere. But before that day, and even after it, I've never seen another shrew. Just that one, on that one morning, right after she had gone.
Does anyone else remember Rotten.com? Rotten.com was a shock site that was active from 1996 to 2012. On the site, you could find anything from videos of real autopsies, crime scene photos, victims of natural disasters, genocide, and pretty much any other awful thing you could think of. The developers of this website rarely posted their own images or videos, and most of the content was actually shared by users of the site itself. And believe it or not, it was incredibly popular. When entering the site, you would see a very simple interface with a bunch of hyperlinks, some of which I had to blur out. The links never had any thumbnails next to them, and there were no hints about what you would see if a link was clicked. Most of the time, the only guess you would have about what the link would show you once you opened it was a one-line description, often disturbingly trying to be humorous about the circumstances behind that image or video. For example, under the title Swan Dive, you would find images of the people jumping from the Twin Towers on 9/11, and Rotten.com was actually the first to publish those images. There was also an area of the website called Celebrity Morgue, where you could view reports and photos from famous people's autopsies. The craziest thing about this is that it was hosted on the surface web, meaning it was totally accessible for anyone to come across on a standard web browser. Throughout its existence, the owners of Rotten.com had faced legal pressure from families of the victims whose images were being shown without their authorization. And even though, from a legal standpoint, they had no grounds to shut the website down because of free speech laws, the developers did eventually take the website down after years of declining traffic to the site as social media was now on the rise.
I decided I'm gonna share another creator's TikTok scary story time with you guys because I feel like it should be seen by more people. So I'm gonna put her @ down below. There's this girl, right? She was a college student. It was her freshman year of college, and she was going to school in Pittsburgh. And like it was her last year, I think she said. So like the next year she would be transferring to go somewhere else. Her and her friends decided that they were gonna go to like a whole bunch of different places in Pittsburgh that they like to go to. And she named like some popular places that like a lot of college students go to, but there was this one specific place that she went to with her friends. The name of the place that her and her friends went to was called the Fountain of Youth, and the Fountain of Youth was basically like a carved out like cave like thing, and when you go inside of it, it had like a well inside of it. So it was a group of her and her friends, and all the short girls went into the cave to get to the well. All the tall girls, including herself, stood on the outside of it. Mind you, they're like in the woods area, so they're surrounded by nothing but trees. Like if they needed to run, it would probably be a little run before they get to anybody or anything, any place. As the girls are inside of there, they're mentioning to the girls on the outside of the cave that they hear moving around going on in the cave, and it sounds like they're moving rocks. The girl that posted the TikTok was like, maybe it's an animal in there, so if you think it's an animal in there, like, come out of the cave. And on their way out of the cave, she's still mentioning that, like, she hears an animal or something in the cave, and in the midst of that, they all hear a growl or like something like that. She mentioned that it didn't sound like a growl from like an animal. It sounded like a human being trying to mimic the growl of an animal, and she couldn't recall like what kind of animal would make that noise in the first place. They all got scared and left. And she said later on, when they were talking about it, I'm assuming the girls that were inside of the cave mentioned that they heard it coming from the inside of the cave. But the girls on the outside of the cave heard it coming from like the woods area, which they were surrounded by. So they're like spooked out about it. The girl that posted the TikTok says that she's getting in the shower now, and she's like, let me calm myself down and wind down. So she's getting ready to take a shower. She's getting undressed in front of a mirror that is in the bathroom, and she notices that there's a big like handprint on her shoulder, like if somebody just grabbed her and it like printed on her body. So she's like, what the fuck is that? She goes outside of the bathroom to ask any of the girls, like, do you guys have any weird marks on your body? Like, make sure you guys are checking yourselves because this is mad weird. The girl that was inside of the cave, I'm assuming it was the one that said she heard an animal shuffling with the rocks. When she pulled up her shirt, there were 3 big scratch marks down that girl's back. And they all freaked out over it, obviously. The girl that posted the video said that she instantly said a prayer. She was like, whatever might have came from the cave and attached itself to us, we rebuke it and we send it back over there. Like, we don't need that. Yeah, I just thought that more people should hear that story because it's really creepy. And also, I feel like a lot of college students always have some sort of creepy, spooky, scary story times.